Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our event. My name is Susan Madera. I'm Academic Program Manager for High Impact Practices and the coordinator of the Common Read. This semester we have about 1,400 students on the Queensboro campus reading The Road of Lost Innocence by Somali Mom. We also have one high school class at Thomas Edison High School. They're reading the book at the same time. The goal of the Common Read is not only to provide you with a book, which is gifted to you by the college, it's yours to keep, but it's also to provide co-curricular cross-disciplinary events. Our hope is that you will make connections between math, English, science, nursing, history, as they connect to the text and as they connect to things globally. Again, our goal is higher education. We're in a place of higher education. So we hope that we will provide you with some information today that will allow you to learn more than you ordinarily would have learned in your class. We're very lucky today, as I said, to have someone with us who's come just to speak with you and share his beautiful artwork with you. His name is Stephen Cavallo, and you'll hear from him in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Arthur Flug. He currently serves as the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center and Archives at Queensboro Community College. Upon graduation from Queens College, he began a career in the New York City school system that would take him through a variety of positions that included classroom teaching, building administrator, and director of comprehensive instructional management systems. After 30 years of experience in the public schools, he accepted a position as district administrator for U.S. Congressman Gary Ackerman and embarked upon a career that included constituent services, budget design, legislative development, fundraising, and community relations. 10 years later, he left to serve a 3-month stint as a volunteer in the Israeli army. Upon returning to the United States, he became the executive director of the Metropolitan Region of the American Jewish Congress, dealing with intergroup relations and church-state issues. After 2 years in this position, he returned to the field of government and became Chief of Staff to New York City Council Finance Chairman David Weprin, doing intensive work in community relations and citywide budget allocations. I can go on and on about Dr. Flug. He's a wonderful man, he's a wonderful human being, and I'm honored to work with him and to have him here. And thank you for allowing us into your space today. So Dr. Arthur Flug.
Thank you. Don't get carried away. Most people, when they hear my resume, say, what's the matter? You couldn't hold a job? But I'm really happy for you to be here. This is not just an educational experience that we're having here today. This is something that is going to possess you. It really is. If you look behind me, you see the words, the Korean comfort women and Asia during World War II, and you see the sign saying, and when I am gone, who will tell my story? 7 years ago, a group of men and women who were Holocaust survivors in their 80s and 90s approached me and said, Dr. Flug, you're the director of the Holocaust Center. We're getting older. We want you to do something about it. And I looked at them and said, I'm getting older also. I wish I could do something about it. But I misunderstood what they asked. What they were saying is, they're going to die soon. And they had no problems with that. They accepted that. What their problem was, they said, was when we are gone, everyone will forget our stories, what happened to us as teenagers, as young college students, as victims during the Holocaust. We want you to do something about it. So what we did was to create an internship where students come here on a regular basis, they study about the Holocaust, and we prepare them to interview Holocaust survivors in great depth about who they were, what happened to them, and who they are now. We've been doing this for 7 years. One of the questions that always comes up during an interview is, now that you've told me your story, what do you want me to do with this information? And every single man and woman that we've ever interviewed said, please, please, don't forget what happened to me. Don't forget. And I tell the students when they hear that realize you've been changed from interns to insurance policies. You are guaranteeing these men and women that they will not be forgotten. And it has worked beautifully. 2 years ago, we were approached by members of the Korean community. And they told us a story that I was familiar with, that in 1937, the Japanese army in Korea rounded up about 150,000 teenage girls between the ages of 13 to maybe 18, 19. They changed their names to Japanese names, and then they raped them. And they said, from now on, you will become what we call comfort women. And they sent these women all over Asia to serve as the Japanese soldiers when they were needed some emotional release, or they just wanted to have sex. These women were there raped constantly 5, 6, 10 times a day for the next 7, 8 years. At the end of World War II, half of them were dead. They had died of disease, they had committed suicide, or they were murdered by the Japanese army. The remaining group said, look what happened to us. And they said, we didn't do anything. You women are a bunch of prostitutes. You follow the soldiers, and you try to do it for money. It's not true. We know it's not true. And so what we did was to form an internship where we have our students come in and study about what happened in Korea during World War II, what happened to these young ladies. And I say, they're your age. People sitting here, they were your age. And I can't say try to imagine what it's like, because you can't imagine what it was like. So what we've done is started an internship where our students study in great detail about what happened in Asia during World War II, and we prepare them to interview these women who are now living in Korea, known as comfort women. What do? We have them interview them. Now the problem arises if we're here in Bayside, Queens, and they are in Seoul, Korea. How do we interview them? Skype. Our students show up here 8:30 at night, because 8:30 at night here is 8:30 in the morning in Seoul, Korea. They ask the questions in English, they're translated into Korean in Seoul, Korea. The answers come back in Korean, we translate it into English. And strangely enough, the last question we ask them is, now that you told me a story, what do you want me to do with this information? Same thing. Tell other people, do not forget what happened to us. And so what we've done is we've created this internship where people study what happened in Asia during to young ladies, your age and younger. When you leave today, you can look outside, you'll see a gallery of faces by the artist that we have here, Steve Cavallo, who put this up and has become part of our exhibit. It's an issue that hasn't gone away. Not because people who committed these crimes denied it is. It's an issue because we are now at a point in society where we can talk about sex trafficking, we can talk about sales of humans, and this is one of the reasons we're here today. I'm delighted you're here. If you have any questions about what I said, I'll be around after. You can let me know. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you our visiting artist, Mr. Steve Cavallo. Thank you, Steve.
I'm extremely informal, so interrupt any time, and when Jimin comes in, we'll pause. My name is Steve Cavallo, and I've been an artist since the mid-'70s, professionally at least, and I began as a commercial artist. But I came across this topic of comfort women. When we go back sometime, if I go now, you may have seen it in the paper, almost every week. But if you go back about 10 years, I've never heard this phrase before. And it began with me. I was doing a series of paintings. I was out with my daughter in Independence, California, early 1990s. And as we're driving down a road, I see a sign for Manzanar internment camp. It was the remains of a Japanese prison camp set up during World War II. For Japanese Americans who they thought were spies, whatever. No one was ever convicted of this. It's just because they were people who looked differently, and they didn't do it with German Americans or anything else, but with Japanese Americans, and they imprisoned them for a few years. I have a relative through marriage who was in one of those camps, and her story was very brief. We owned a cleaning service, a laundromat. They took us, they put us in the camp. When we came out, the laundromat was there, but Americans owned it. We never sold it to the Americans. And it was, she didn't say much, and she said we were forced to eat terrible American food and things like that. And she was very short with her answers. but I decided to do some paintings on the internment camps. And as I researched it, and again, I'm going back to the early 90s, there wasn't a lot on the internet. It was more difficult to do researching. And I had written a children's book on the subject, but I'm not a writer, and the children's book was written poorly. But I tried to bring this out, and I had heard about this in high school. But in the middle of working on this project, and the reason I'm telling this is because a lot of times I've been confronted by Japanese newspapers, are you anti-Japanese? I said, no, it actually began with this. But while I was working on this project on the Japanese internment camps, a Korean neighbor said to me, you do know about comfort women, right? And I said, no, I've never heard that term in my life. And she explained what Dr. Fluke said, that these women and young girls were raped up to 10, sometimes 20 times a day, and then disposed of after they were all used up, quoting what the former comfort women say. When our bodies were no longer beautiful, when we were bruised, when we were scarred, they would take them out and kill them. It was hard for me to believe that this was never in the textbooks when I was growing up, hearing this in high school. So it took a little while, but I started researching it, and I came across a book by a woman named Kim Gibson, who lives right here in the Bronx, actually. And I had contacted her, and it was a long process actually getting into doing the artwork of it. When I was about 11 years old, my uncle gave me some people here might know Bob Dylan, some people might not. But my uncle gave me a Bob Dylan album. He knew that you know, my brothers listened to the Beatles and the Monkees and the Dave Clark Five and all the 60s. But I always had a mind for human rights. And there was a line in a song called The Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, and it said, I'll know my song well before I start singing. And it's not an amazing line, but for some reason it hit me. And I carried that throughout my artwork, to know my song well, not that I'm singing, but you know, to know my subject well before I start painting about it. So I started researching, reading every book I could find on comfort women, getting in touch with the House of Sharing, which is a home for former comfort women, speaking to Kim Gibson, and asking her to speak at a place where I do the art shows. And I said to Dashel, I said, what can you help me with in working on this project, in telling these women's story? And she said, why are you asking me? You have to find that out for yourself. So not long after that, I had emailed the House of Sharing, and somebody said, come out and meet the women. We can't tell you what to paint. I figured, wow, a trip to Korea. You know, it's an expensive trip. It's a long time. And my wife had said to me, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. So this began in 2009. I had already done my first 2 or 3 shows on exhibits on comfort women and other atrocities. I began it with paintings, which I thought was a wonderful idea. I loved this art show, but it only got negative reviews. When I was a kid, I had these little green plastic army soldiers, and it would always show the good guy and the bad shooting the bad guy, and we would play, bang, bang, you're dead, okay, you're alive again, and start it again. And I decided to do paintings, watercolor paintings, of green action figures, but not showing the hero and the bad guy. I decided to show the Holocaust, and it was, when it was framed, the picture next to it would be a caption, Holocaust victims come complete with barbed wire fence, not suitable for children ages 5 and under. Hiroshima victims, you know, comes complete with this. And then comfort women. And the one painting of a comfort woman, and it said, comes complete with 50 Japanese soldiers, because some of them said they were raped up to 50 times a day. And some people got what I was trying to say in the art show. Some people didn't. And it was in a Korean art gallery, and there was a lot of objections to it. And the one person said, well, why are you bringing up this subject again? Because the women want this subject to be brought up again. So I had this, and you know, it was a strange art show, because a lot of times in an art show, people look at the paintings. That's it. They look, and they're drinking wine, and they're talking. With this, it was quiet, and people were going around and reading the captions, and they were all captions that were, you know, that had the twist, that the way that we look at war, including the hero and the bad guy, you know, they're shooting the guy. Well, that guy who was just shot had a family and a mother and kids and whatever, the sense you don't look beyond what's happening right there when you're a child playing with these action figures. So I had done this project, and afterwards one of the Korean news stations ran a short piece on the art show, and I got an email from the woman from the House of Sharing, said, come out and meet the women, they want to meet you. So I arranged to fly to Korea, and some people say, well, what did you get from your trip in Korea? I got there and spent about a week at the House of Sharing. And my wife is Korean, but she didn't stay with me out there. I wanted to do it on my own. So when we met, she visited her family. I went to the House of Sharing, and I spent a week with these women, and I've heard them speak, and I heard their testimonies. But that's not the biggest thing I brought back from it. And this is very strange. What I brought back from my trip was having breakfast with them every morning, sitting there and forgetting actually what their past was. And I'm sitting having breakfast, and sometimes I'll turn and I'll look and I'll think, oh wow, I saw this woman on the internet 100 times, you know, in all the Wednesday protests. They protest every Wednesday. They've had over 1,000 consecutive protests in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. And it just became people I knew, and then all of a sudden it registered, wow, this is the person. I read her whole story from what happened to her in World War II, how she was abducted, what happened afterward, how she went home. And many of them, their families just had the feeling of what happened. There was no word spoken, but they knew what had happened to them. And the families sometimes cast them out because of gossip through the neighborhood. So that's what I came back with, that it wasn't a statistic, it wasn't a book I read, it wasn't a movie I saw or anything like that, or an interview with someone who had met them. I was waking up, having breakfast with them. They were teaching me how to hold my chopsticks better, and it got to be just the typical way you would maybe spend a weekend or a week with your grandparents. So it was a wonderful experience to be with them and to get to know them. And they would rather, and again, I work through translators, but they would rather speak about anything but the World War II years. And even when they spoke here on 2 occasions, they'll talk, and they'll talk about their lives before they were abducted, right up until their abduction. Then they'll skip to the later years and talk about that. And the later years never got less painful. The one woman said to me, Il Chung Kang, who was supposed to be here, and I think she got anxiety before she got on the plane last summer. She was supposed to be here to speak. But she said, I used to go to the Catholic Church. She said, until I realized everybody was whispering, the woman back there, she's a former comfort woman. So it was a difficult life for them up until these days. But in recent times, what I've said to them many times and what I've said to the press many times, they still haven't received an apology from Japan. And I highly doubt they're going to receive the proper apology. But they do have the rest of the world. They have so many people in America fighting for them. And I likened it to, and again, this is a far stretch, but when I was a kid, if I had an argument with somebody in class, and that kid wouldn't apologize, but the rest of the class was on my side, there was some comfort in that. So what had happened is, if Jimin comes in, I'm going to let her take over, but come in. We had, after I had worked on a couple of these shows, and when I was going to Korea for the first time in 2009, somebody from the KAVC, which is now called CASE, Korean American Civic Empowerment, I believe, they said, we wanted to do a memorial for them. So I said, well, gee, I know the mayor in Palisades Park. It's a large Korean community. Let me ask him. I called him up, and he said, I had never heard of Comfort Women. He came, I gave him Dashiell's book. We spoke for a half hour, an hour. And he said, let's do it. And I brought here a bunch of catalogs that we have that we just printed on the past 4 years. We did the world's first, actually, memorial to Comfort Women there. and there was very little opposition. We had two people who came to the planning meeting for it who just said, well, you know, this happened in Korea, this happened in Japan, why are we getting involved? But we likened it to the Holocaust, and we said we think we need this. We think we need, and it's outside of the Free Public Library in Palisades Park. And since then, a number of other memorials have cropped up on comfort women. So it's a powerful thing because it's a 1 mile square town, and I could say whenever I'm there, I teach some art classes at the library. Whenever I'm there, if I'm by the window, many times I see cars roll up, people get out of the cars, come and take a picture, lay flowers down, and it's a heartwarming thing to see how many people come and visit. I had visited with my sisters-in-law last February, and they came from Korea, and they had seen it in the papers, on television several times. And when they pulled up, the one said, "Oh, it's so small," and the other one said, "Yeah, but the message is so big." And I thought that was wonderful. They said it all right there, you know, in broken English. But that was really it. It's a small little monument, a humble monument there, about this high. As a matter of fact, here it is on the cover. It's a small stone and a little plaque, and it's visited so often. The message is so big, and again, it was never meant as an anti-Japanese monument, but what it is it's a human rights, a women's rights monument to let people know that the same tactics are being used today in human trafficking, as you've read that book. Either being lied to, either being kidnapped, there's some sort of deception. It's the same lies. Whenever she's ready, she certainly can interrupt me, and then we'll have a question and answer if we have that. But the last thing that I'll say before we do some question and answers is that on May 6th, I believe that was 2012, I believe, we had visitors from the Japanese Parliament come to Palisades Park with some ideas. And again, this is not a reflection on Japanese people at all. This is politicians from Japan who came in and they said, you know, Palisades Park's a beautiful town. We'd like to get involved in your town. We'd like to donate some cherry blossom trees. We'd like to have an exchange student program with you, and we'd also like to donate books for the library. Just one problem: could you get rid of that memorial? So I was on my way back from vacation, and my wife and I were on a cruise. We pulled into New York Harbor, and I look and I say, all of these, you know, Mayor Rotundo, Deputy Mayor Kim, and what's going on? So I called, and they said 4 o'clock today. So I run over to the bar, and there's a number of men sitting there demanding at this point that we remove the memorial, saying that Japanese students are being bullied by the Korean students, which the police had no record of that. And each of us had an opportunity to interview these people asking. I'm going to let everybody come on in. Come on, it's very informal. Come in, get comfortable. So to recap, I'm one of the people who worked on the first U.S. memorial for comfort women, and we had visitors from the Japanese Parliament who asked us to remove it. When I got to speak to them, I said, well, let me ask you something. You came all the way from Japan here to New Jersey, I said, to talk to us about this. Have you ever gone to Korea? At this time, it was the beginning of the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman trial, or we were waiting for it. I said, we have a case going on right now in the States where we only have, did I lose my power? No, I'm on. Where we only have one of the people involved alive. The other person, unfortunately, is dead. What we would give to be able to interview both of them. If we still had Trayvon Martin alive, that we could talk to him and hear his version of the story. We don't. I said, we still have, now we have, I believe, 55 former comfort women still alive. At that time, it was about 65. I said, we have some of these women alive. It's a 2 or 3 hour plane ride from Japan to Korea. Have you ever gone over to Korea to meet with these women and ask them, what's your side of the story? Now, as I'm sure all of you have experienced in your life, you're speaking to somebody, you can tell when a person's lying. And maybe one person might be able to deceive you, but I've met probably 10 to 15 former comfort women. hearing their stories. In California, we were with Jimin Kim for a week doing the Glendale Memorial, and that was breakfast, lunch, dinner, traveling around, sightseeing California. When a person's lying, I would know it. And I sat face to face with these women and saw them shiver, saw them tremble as they would tell their stories, even though their stories were in Korean being translated to me. I said to the Japanese gentleman, I said, have you ever taken that time off? And no, he said. But the way he said it was almost like that would be beneath me. Not only to speak to a Korean, but also a woman, to go and hear her side of the story. The people who are fighting against the memorials we're doing and saying that this is all made up, that they were prostitutes, and I had said to him at that time, do you realize there's a big difference in calling a rape victim a prostitute? What harsher slap in the face could you give them than doing that by calling them a prostitute? But he was very unfeeling and really didn't care. Now again, I emphasize, this is no reflection on most of the people of Japan, whereas I was in the House of Sharing, and most of the people with me in the House of Sharing that were visiting were Japanese students from Kobe College. So I can't say that these 5 people who visited are the norm in rejecting this. It is a political view of what they had. I'm actually going to pause right now because we have Jimin here, and I'm going to let her speak. I'm going to put you up, and then afterwards I'll take questions and answers. Okay? It's okay.
Hi, I'm Jimin Kim. I'm the instructor for the Asian Social Justice Program, and I'd like to introduce our program briefly. The program is on war crimes in East Asia, and we deal especially with compared women issue. And I and student interns discuss about war crimes in East Asia and how the war affected those women, survivor compared women in Korea. And we, after the discussions, we interview with compared women in Korea using Skype. So this program is special, I think, because it provides students to directly talk with compared women and ask questions and listen to their answers. And by talking with those survivors, we get not only historical knowledge, but also an emotional understanding of their history. Although we learn history from books, news articles, and even documentary films, is totally different if you talk with those people who actually experienced these war crimes. And when you think of compared women, you imagine someone living in a very different world from ours. But actually, after talking with them, you realize that they are just ordinary grandmothers in their 70s and 80s. And they are ordinary grandmothers with their stories in the past. So, and they like to share their stories with you. But at the same time, we understand that it is not easy for them to share their stories, such private and humiliating experiences with those young people on the other side of the world. But they like to share their stories because they like to be remembered. Their stories be remembered, and our stories would not be forgotten. So they are so brave and strong to share their stories with us. At the same time, their stories are so powerful that our students often tell me that it was a life-changing event, life-changing opportunity. And one student last year told me this program changed his life forever. It changed his perspectives on lives and human rights. And we interviewed one compared woman last year, compared woman survivor Yu, and she told us her story, like how she was kidnapped by 2 Japanese men in her own village when she was 15, and she was taken to China and became compared woman. But the most heartbreaking part of her story was her recent situation. After she came forward to tell her stories, some of her children don't want to talk with her anymore because they felt ashamed of the fact that their mother was a compared woman. So we like to help them. We like to stand and tell their stories, and we like to listen to their stories, and we like to have their dignity restored. And our actions are especially important as Japanese government has not given a full apology to these women, nor has it offered compensation to the victims. Instead, they established a private charitable organization to pay limited amount of money to these women, and the survivors didn't accept the money. What they want is full apology, full and sincere apology. And the current Japanese Prime Minister once questioned publicly whether Japan's military had actually coerced these women into sexual slaves. And several months ago, Osaka mayor said that the compared women system was inevitable during the war. So it was not decades ago. It was several months ago. So that's why history matters, and why this program is important. The compared women issue is not a problem in the past. It is more of a living, breathing, unfolding story that continues and is relevant today. How to solve the compared women issue is related to how to preserve human rights of all of us, especially women's human rights, in the future. I urge you, all of you, to join us, to learn more about compared women and help us spreading the stories. If you like to take a further step, you are all welcome to apply for the internship in the future. It is open to all QCC students. Thank you.
The one thing that I do want to mention again that she said is how the one intern said it changed their lives to do it. I have to say it changed my life too. Some people say, geez, 2007, you've been working on this since 2007, but there was a big difference. It was almost 2 projects. There was the one project I worked on before I met the women, and the paintings I did then, and then everything after. After I got to know the women, it was a completely different thing. It was a personal thing. Again, I go back to the interviews we had with the Japanese parliament members. It was a completely different thing when they said they were nothing more than prostitutes. Now, thinking about the women I read about in history books, it's an insult. But thinking about these women that I had breakfast with, as I was saying, in California, when we were out in Glendale, California, working on that memorial, we were with Bakdang Kim, who is now blind, and we had breakfast, lunch, dinner with her, the little sightseeing with her, you know, going around different places. We protested in front of the Japanese embassy in Los Angeles. It became someone I knew, and I've said this before about being at the House of Sharing, but we were at a barbecue one night, and it started getting cool, and my wife and Bakdang Kim huddled under a blanket together, and they were sitting there and talking, and again, it escaped me that this is one of the victims. And I always do apologize for referring to them as comfort women, forced sexual slaves. Comfort women, for some reason, is such a softer, it's a horrible phrase, but it's a softer thing. They were forced sexual slaves. They were rape victims. I've gotten so used to working on what we call the Comfort Women Project, and I apologize for always referring to them that way. But sitting there at the barbecue and seeing my wife and her huddled together and thinking how Bakdang Kim or any of the other Yeoksun who was here last summer, how each age, you know, my wife's in her early 50s, some of you here are in your 20s and in between, they've gone through each of those ages and never lived. You know, I can think back to 25, what I did at 25, what I did at 27, what I did at 30, how different their lives were because of what had happened to them. And again, so few of them, you know, the numbers are very different in how many of them were massacred after the war, how many of them survived. When I first started this project, and again, because of their age, it's happening quickly, but when I first started this project in 2007, maybe around 2008, the numbers I was getting were there were approximately 100 still alive. Now we're down to, I believe, 55. Who is still living, and you know, even without that difficult past, people at that age, you know, they're getting on in years, especially with their condition. When I was in the house of sharing, there were about 6, 7 women that I was going to see the garden with them. They have a little garden planted there, having dinner, but a number of them were in bed with all machines hooked up to them, and again, some of them have passed away. So it's a very personal thing. I don't think I've said this before, but I'll end my speaking time with this one comment. When I began this, I figured this is a wonderful project. I got to know the women, and now I can be, in a sense, the voice of the Comfort Women. And Dashiell King Gibson said to me, don't ever think you're the voice of the Comfort Women. They're giving you voice. And it's true. As an artist, as a writer, whatever your profession might be, I'm not their voice. They gave me a voice. Had I not met them, I don't know what my art would be. I might be, not that there's anything wrong with painting flowers and landscapes and things like that. They're beautiful. But this has become such a meaningful part of my life to, again, not just fight for a cause, but to fight for women I know and for women who've become really a part of my life. We've been in touch quite often, and the one other thing, and I'll close with this, is that many of the women, when they do talk about their children, are adopted children or children from a marriage, because most of them could not have children. So that was the case. I know Lee Yeok-sun, when she talked about her children, and they said, you were able to have children. How many do you have? But they're not my children. You know, I adopted them, or I took them in from someone else. So we never actually showed any of the artwork there. Is the PowerPoint working, or I have no idea how to do these things. I sent them to Marissa to make the PowerPoint. We can go through it quickly, but any questions? Yes?
Yes, you obviously made a tremendous personal investment in this endeavor. What toll did it take upon your personal life with all this time invested in this particular subject? Because it seems almost consuming.
Yeah, I would say it definitely is. It's hard to say because it was such a part of my life, but the toll it took, yeah, there were bouts of depression, I would have to say, being surrounded by not just doing the paintings, but reading the books. And I did try to fill my life with this subject. So it took a toll in that sense. And then it also took a toll in the sense when we do get people who go and say with the prostitutes. There's a man on YouTube who a number of Japanese people. The one job that I had or assignment that I had was the mayor and council of Palisades Park did receive some hate mail from Japan, and they asked me would I handle the hate mail. It was only from 5 or 6 people, but many mails from each one, and they would send me these YouTube videos by an American guy in Texas that the Japanese called Texas Daddy. His name is Anthony Marino. And he does these terrible YouTube, and they're still on there. You can watch it, and you can imagine, knowing the women, how offensive these are, but without knowing them, they're still offensive. Where he does these short things about how the Koreans are lying, and why would the Japanese want Korean women, besides they're ugly, and then he has a picture of a woman with a paper bag over her head. They were racist. They were just horrible. But again, I keep saying this over and over. It's not the majority of the Japanese public, but there are people following this and feeding off of this type of video. And then I received a video once talking about how the Koreans stole the logo for Hyundai from Honda. And I tell these people, I don't want to watch this stuff. I'm fighting for these women, which brings up another subject. At one time, someone put a stick on our memorial in Palisades Park, fighting about an island called Dokdo Island, which has been a long-time controversy between Korea and Japan. And many Korean people were so upset that they vandalized the memorial. When I was interviewed, I said, I find the biggest insult is that they used the Comfort Women Memorial to make this statement. It shows that land is one thing, a woman's body is something else. And just to relate the fact that you're protesting about a piece of land on a memorial towards rape victims, so it just showed the insensitivity. You want to protest about Dokdo Island and whatever, do it, but not here. This is something dedicated to these women whose lives were ruined. Anything else? Yes? I did there are a number of memorial. There is the statue in Glendale, California. No, that was, I believe, a husband and wife team. I did this memorial. This was the first memorial. And again, we didn't have the budget for anything like this, anything like the Glendale, which is a beautiful memorial. The same one is in Seoul. Ours is very small. I did the drawing on this, which was a pen and ink drawing that was translated into stone. I'm sorry, into bronze. So I did this one here, but there is a beautiful, powerful memorial that's in Seoul in front of the Japanese embassy, and they have another one in Glendale, California, which is a replica of the one in Seoul, and it's a powerful thing. And the reason why it's so powerful is because it's so subtle. It's a young girl sitting on a chair with an empty chair next to her. You can now I can't speak for the artist what were in their minds, but you can sit next to this woman and identify with her. She's a young girl. She's not pointing a finger. She's not doing anything. She's sitting there, looking at the people as they go into the embassy. So it's an amazing memorial. I wish I had done that one. We had done this one. We had a small budget, and again, it was the first one. And I always give great credit to the mayor of Palisades Park, because at this time, no one had heard of Comfort. You know, I'm not no one, but the general public had never heard of Comfort Women, and he put his political career on the line to do this. It was a new subject to him, and he said, let's do it, let's do it. And one other site had been rejected before. They said, no, we don't want to get involved. And he got involved, and after the Japanese Parliament visited, the New York Times came, CNN came, Fox International News came. In fact, when Fox International News came to see the memorial, they had called me. I said, I'm in California, but I'm sitting right next to Bakdang Kim, a former Comfort Woman. Would you like to and they set up a live feed from California to New York, where Ainsley Earhart interviewed her from New York to California, which was a powerful. And when I got on the phone afterwards with Ainsley, she said I was almost in tears. She said, I'm a reporter, and nothing affected me like this, speaking to this woman and hearing about her life. Anything else? I think I've covered a lot. Yes.
Do you think you would want to talk to Mr. Marino? I saw that video you're talking about. I saw the one where he went over to France. There was an exhibition in France for animation and illustration, and he picked out the Japanese delegation because they were there specifically protesting the idea that there were comfort women and that they were victims. And so he made a big video about that.
I haven't seen that, but I did see the art show online, yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if somebody could actually speak to him, or is he even seeking? I wrote like a little thing saying, well, really? And I got some response saying, oh, you should look at history. So he's disputing. One of his videos, he says he has a document from the U.S. Army saying that, oh, we captured these women, and that it documents that they were paid and all of this. So if it's a historical dispute, it's the evidence that really matters. Right. So for that guy, he should, maybe he's not seeing all the evidence.
Yeah, I don't think he's seeing the evidence, and I think there's a big difference, as I said, in looking at a lot of papers, which when the Japanese Parliament visited us in Palisades Park, they had a newspaper ad, a Xerox copy of a newspaper ad, recruiting women for prostitution, and they based everything on that. There's a big difference in whatever papers people want to produce and whatever papers people wanted to destroy. There's a difference between that and meeting the women and talking to them and interviewing them, as I said earlier, with any court case. To have the victim right there and to speak to the victim, that's the whole reason we do that. So often you can tell when someone's lying, and these women, women I became to know. So yes, if you haven't seen this Anthony Marino's video, I encourage you to watch it. It's frustrating, and I've never spoken to him, and I don't think I ever would, because as you can see, he's very headstrong, and he's very and I don't even want to go into the place, even if they were prostitutes, whatever. I wouldn't even go there, because they're not. But he is so callous towards it and almost mocking these women who had this difficult life. And I would wonder if he has ever sat down and spoken to these women. I don't think he has. And as I understand, he's a hero to some people in Japan. He's gone over to Japan and signed his book. He's a character, but I think his YouTube thing is Texas Daddy. That's what they call him. But if you put in the keywords "comfort women," I'm sure you'll see his pieces. But that show in France was wonderful. Whenever I see another person's comfort women exhibits, working on the same project, I just think, oh, I wish I thought of that. I wish I had thought of that, because the person had a very different approach and a very interesting approach. Anybody else?
Dr. Kim or Mr. Cavallo, would you like to address the pictures as they come up?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yes, this is a student's presentation about their interview with Comfort Women last year.
This is one of the earlier ones that I've done, and the way when I was reading some of the testimonies of the women, they said it wasn't like we were regarded as human beings at all. It was almost like we were made out of wood or dolls, and I painted a series of women almost like scarecrows, that they're just images. A scarecrow isn't a real person. It's an image of a person out in the field, and that's how they were regarded. The interesting thing about this is the model for each of these is a Japanese woman who said, I want to work with you on the project. When I said, how do you feel about working on the Comfort Women project, she said, we've all done wrong things. She said, I'd be happy to help you anytime you need it. And she did the posing for these. But that was the feeling. I try never in my work, I think in one or two early on, I showed some scene insinuating the rape thing, but knowing the women, I stay away from that completely. But that's what this was, the dehumanization of the women. This was a testimony from Dashiell Kim Gibson's book, from one of the Comfort Women. The bottom here is cut off. She's picking a flower. And this was a horrible, horrible story. And this one I think is used most, this painting, that the one woman would go out early in the morning and pick grass and wild flowers and stuff them up her nose, because the stench from the Japanese soldiers was so horrible. She would put the things in her nose, so if she breathed in, she could try to get her mind somewhere else. So I did the woman picking the grass and wild flowers while the line of soldiers, and this background I took from famous photographs of Japanese soldiers lined up to go into a comfort station. This was the design for the memorial. I did change the positioning of the woman in there, but the Japanese soldier approaching the room. And what Dr. Flug said was correct, that each of these women, their Korean names were taken away and they were given a Japanese name, but after a while they said they were known by their room number, and there was even one step further. So that's, again, this was the same design for this memorial here. This was one of the ones I did on, as I said at the beginning, they were I did them as action figures, and this was Comfort Woman nightmare scene. And what it was the one woman said, right now, again, a testimony from Dashiell's book, right now I'm standing here talking to you and I'm okay, but once I go back to bed tonight, I see these faceless men coming one by one, lining up to be with me. So it was the agony that the woman was in her nightmares. But again, when she's talking, when she's around people, she was okay. But once again, the ghosts come back to haunt her. I think I have that testimony in the book here, actually, which is, excuse me just one second. No, I'm sorry. It's in here somewhere, but I don't want to take time finding it. But you feel free to take one of these books if you'd like. That was the very first Comfort Woman thing that I had done, and it was Comfort Woman action figure with Japanese soldier. Comfort Woman action figure comes complete with 50 Japanese soldiers, and again, this was for the Toy Soldier series that I had done. This is I did a series of faces, and there were about 50 faces to begin with, and I did these larger series here because I wanted it to be, some of them were former Comfort Women, some of them were just regular people that I got around the town of Palisades Park, and I told them what I was doing, and they posed for me, just face, 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 and when the people came to the reception of the art exhibit, I thought it was important for people like parents, kids, brothers, sisters to walk in and say, whoa, that's my daughter, mixed in with all, because it could have been you. Again, I was big in the 60s on the folk music scene, and there was a guy named Phil Oakes who wrote a song, There But For Fortune Go You or I, and it was, had she been born at a different time in a different place, it could have been her. And it was powerful for the models themselves to see it, but for the families of the models, I think sometimes it hit them even more to say, wow, that's my daughter. Right next to her is Yeok-san or Il-chul Kang or so on. So this was it, and it says I was taken from my home at an early age. I was buried in a shallow grave, and I believe that one's right out there. Again, another one, I was taken from my home at an early age. I was too ashamed to return home. Taken from a home at an early age. 1 week later, I hung myself. And these are all from testimonies of what had happened to the women. I was taken from a home at an early age. I was raped over and over again before I started menstruating. I was taken from a home at an early age. Why are you still ignoring this crime? And this is Hwasun Kim, who passed away about 1.5 years ago. I died in 2012 without an apology. I was taken from a home at an early age. I will not be silent. And this is a long painting here. I had done this painting, and this one really is one of my favorites. This is only just a piece of the painting here. But it's a large painting with morning glories, the traditional Korean flower, kind of descending around her. And it's called In Our Dreams We Fly. And just those moments when you could get... I like this because it doesn't necessarily hit the hard subject, but touches who the women are. You know, I don't know if you've ever had that where you're walking in the springtime, which we still haven't experienced spring, but walking in the springtime and you smell a newly mowed lawn, and it brings you back to your childhood. And I just, after being with the women at one of the events I thought, wow, I wonder if they ever go back to the years before their abduction. I have a number of paintings where I likened it to the crucifixion. I was reading a book on crucifixion back in the days of Jesus, and saying that it was the most shameful way, the most humiliating way to die, because they would actually hang you on the cross naked in the town square for everyone to see your crime. You were a public display. Afterwards, many times, they would behead you and put the head on a stake in the public square. And I thought, what more humiliating crime could these women endure than to be raped over and over and over again, and then to be rejected by their families and by their community. Again, I have her reaching out. I use the morning glories quite often because, to me, different smells, different things like that, always bring me back to another time. And so I used that. She's reaching out to there. I was asked several times, is there a religious background in this? No, I only used crucifixion as a means of torture, a means of shame and humiliation. With this, it was just, again, the front of it. Some of these got cropped. But the reason I put the barbed wire in there is barbed wire is something where it can keep people out. You know, I have a place and I put barbed wire around, it keeps you out, but also barbed wire is used to keep people in. You know, again, talking about the Japanese internment camps, how there was barbed wire around. So barbed wire is something that keeps people out, it keeps people in, and her hair is turning into barbed wire. How some of the women were very hard to, they had a difficult time trusting new visitors to the House of Sharing. And Yeok's son, who was here twice actually, was one. They said it takes her a couple of days to warm up to you. And she never greeted me during the time I was there when we were at the protest. Then she was hugging me and things like that. And this 2 times since, she had come here. And I think one of the nicest, and I say this hesitantly, but one of the nicest honors is the last time I had seen her, the president or general manager of the House of Sharing said she always refers to you as her grandson. And I thought that was one of the most touching things I've ever heard. But the barbed wire was there for a while, where she was the only one who wasn't talking to me. Again, an early one, and again, one of my favorites, how they were given Japanese names, they were given kimonos to wear, and here she is taking off her Japanese identity and returning back to her Korean identity, going back to who she is and having pride in her own culture.
Okay, this is when Oksan Lee, former comfort woman, visited us in July 2013. She met with Holocaust survivor, and our student interns had presentation about their interview with her. Yes, student interns. And this student intern is an art major, and he decided to paint on comfort women, and that's his painting.
Greg, I can't remember his last. I still keep in touch with Greg all the time.
Yes, the painting is on the wall across the room. And Oksan Lee and with our students.
This was Kim, who passed away, and this was the same faces out there, but this was the first one I had done at the House of Sharing. She posed for me, and it was sad when she posed for me. She said, paint me, you'll be famous. And she sat and posed for me that day. But before she posed, she went and she put lipstick on, and she made herself as nice looking as she could be. And it was very sad when she passed away. But Yeok's son, when she was here, they were very close. They lived in the same place together, and she asked for that painting over there, but she said, could you make it smaller? I said, I actually have the original, which is this one small. This is only 9 by 12, so I gave her that before she went back to Korea. That's it. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and I thank you for inviting me.
We have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, on the artwork, I noticed some you signed with the chop. As a Western artist, why did you decide to do that in your painting?
I actually didn't take it from, I knew it was an Asian symbol, but I got it from, I love the way Gustav Klimt, the Austrian artist, signed his name in the same way. And I had started doing it at that time. When I did the Comfort Women paintings, I made it more traditional for Korean type look, but it actually was inspired by Klimt. But excellent question, thank you.
I'd like to take it back home now, if I could, to discuss the Common Read text. Can anyone here tell me the connections that they see between the Comfort Women and the women in Cambodia? Yes?
I read the book. I read it.
And what connection do you see between these two topics?
It's a human trafficking and human rights violation that's still continuing and it's basically the same thing, and also caused by war. The Cambodian situation is coming out of war from Vietnam, and how the devastation of the country, and just made people descend into this extremely barbaric situation where people just didn't seem to care about each other and didn't care about the most defenseless people. And I guess they had that because it's their own people doing it to themselves in this case. So it's like, you know, what would make somebody do that? They must have something inside them or something that was done to them that now they're taking it out on somebody else.
Yeah, and it's very sad that these women and women around the world who are affected by sexual trafficking, they lose their voice. They're in fear for their lives, for their families' lives. And so they're put into a situation where pretty much they're silenced. Yes?
The other thing, too, is also the tradition that with the Cambodian situation, that the women are brought up to think that they have to serve their parents. So they almost go into it and don't try to escape it because it's part of the culture that, oh, I have to do this for my family, especially if they've been like put into it by their family. And that actually was the case in certain parts with the colonial situation in Korea, that their families like let these girls go into it, maybe not understanding the full, you know, implications of it, but also there were people that sold them out, literally, like in African American civilization, slavery. You had people that, you know, benefited, you know, from that exploitation of their own people. So that is actually also the case. That's like a big controversy in the African American things, like, oh, these Africans were sold by Africans. And you had that also in the Korean situation as well.
But we have to realize people weren't always sold. People were stolen.
Yeah.
Many of these women were stolen. Steve, am I correct? These women were stolen.
Every which way.
Every which way. In Cambodia, we know some families sold their children. There's actually a town in India where they are so poor that families raise their children knowing that one or two of them will be prostitutes to support the rest of the family. And it's accepted. No one shuns them, it's accepted. But it's the culture of that town in that particular country. Human trafficking is happening everywhere. It's happened throughout history and it continues to happen today. If you look around this room about genocide, and we've had several events here, these atrocities have taken place for 100 years, and they're not stopping. What can we do to stop this? As human beings, what can we do? Nothing. You think nothing?
Oh man, this seems to like go on because people, it's coming out of people lack of resources. People just having this, it seems, innate intolerance to people that are different.
So how do we change intolerance? How do we change ignorance? What do we do as human beings? There must be something. There's education. Thank you, my friend.
Always pockets of people that are not.
There will always be pockets of people who hate. But as human beings and as educated human beings, the goal is for us to learn from these atrocities and to be a voice for these women. How many of you knew about the Comfort Women before this semester? 3 people. So now more of you know of this. How many of you will go out and speak to other people about this? Thank you. The whole goal is through education to let people know what happened. Not only to keep their stories alive, but to stop this from happening again. If you don't know that this is taking place, you cannot be their voice. But now we've educated you. And through Steve's beautiful artwork, now you can put faces to these people. And please, when you do leave, look at the artwork that's posted in the hall. It's absolutely haunting. I was telling Steve that I was in this room yesterday and looking out the door, and right here I see her. There's a woman whose eyes follow me, and she haunted me all last night, all this morning. I feel that she's looking inside of me to do something. And this is my way of doing something. Please do something. Be a vehicle for change, even if it's only to share this story. And coming back to the book, we have to speak about Somali Mom, who is a vehicle for change now after all that she went through. She puts her life on the line on a daily basis, going into the brothels, taking these young women out. And she not only saves them, but she educates them. She shelters them. She loves them. She provides them with an opportunity to support themselves. Can you go to such extremes? It's not necessary, but to educate yourself in this place of higher learning and in the Kupferberg Center today, that's an amazing thing. So I thank you for coming today, and I also invite you to attend the other events. Today is the 10th event of 22, I'm sorry, it's the 11th event of 22 events that we have going on. So there are more this week, there are more next week. We have the FBI and Homeland Security coming next week. They're going to tell us what's going on in the world. We have someone who's from Ethiopia who's speaking to us about women who were trafficked. They take their passports away, they bring them to the Middle East, and they're forced into slavery. These are things, again, you don't know about. Allow us to educate you. You need to know what's going on in the world and become a global citizen. We also have Senator Peralta coming next Thursday. Senator Peralta is in Jackson Heights. Jackson Heights is the hotbed of human trafficking in Queens. And he's working hard on legislation to stop it. So this is an opportunity for you to meet with a senator and actually question him as to what's going on. So thank you very much for coming. And I do have to say in closing that some of these events and some of the topics in the book may cause you to feel uncomfortable. And if you are uncomfortable, know that we have the Counseling Center on campus located in the library building in room 422. The counselors there have read the book, and they're able to speak to you in confidence. Just please, when you go to the Counseling Center, identify yourself as someone who's been reading the book or who has gone to an event, and they'd be glad to meet with you in confidence. So thank you very much for coming today. And a round of applause for Steve Cavallo and for his beautiful artwork. Steve, I hope you can stay for a few minutes in the hallway and speak to us about your pictures. Wouldn't that be great? Thank you.